So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's course micro event on analytics. We have two speakers with us today. The first speaker is Professor Fredrik Odegaard from Ivey Business School. His talk is entitled An OR Tale of Analytics, AI, and Auctions. I will present his brief bio and then I will pass on to Dr. Fredrik. Professor Odegaard has a PhD in Management Science from the Sauder School of Business at the University of British Columbia with dual master's degrees in Operations Research and Statistics from Stanford University. He did his undergrad in Purchasing and Logistics Management from Arizona State University. His PhD thesis centered on the analysis of online auctions as salvage sales channels and how to optimally release inventory so as to balance the effects of price cannibalization and time value depreciation. Dr. Odegaard joined Ivey Business School in 2007 and has developed a wide spectrum of analytics courses within all programs offered at Ivey. He has taught courses on decision making with analytics, competing with analytics, revenue management, statistics, big data, data science, and creative analytics. His main research area is within revenue management and auction theory, but also publishes broadly within operations research and operations management, including healthcare, DEA, and supply chain management. Prior to his academic career, Professor Odegaard worked as a supply chain consultant for the logistics software provider I2 Technologies and as a program director at RR Institute of Applied Economics, during which he worked with a number of corporate clients, including Fujitsu, Siemens Computers, Nokia, Lucchini, Infineon, Royal Copenhagen, Novo Nordisk, the Swedish Armed Forces Headquarters, the Swedish Institute Evaluation of Labor Market and Education Policy, and the Danish Ministry of Energy. Dr. Odegaard is an active member of the CORS Operational Research Society and has served in numerous roles, including the 2015-2016 president and chair of CORS 2019 Saskatoon and CORS 2024 London annual conferences. He also serves as editorial board member of the Journal of Revenue and Pricing Management. Thank you very much, Professor Odegaard. I pass on to you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's been a while since I looked over that bio I must have on, and as you were reading it, oh yeah, that's right, I did that. I was working there as well. Like, forgot about Danish Ministry of Energy. I remember now I did a workshop for them on DEA. Actually, this is many years ago. So we got a cozy collection of people here, and I was a little bit. I didn't know how many people would actually have the interest and energy on a Monday morning to start here. So thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Nagar, and thank you, Anjali. And it's not the smallest audience I've had. I had once give a talking for two people. So this is, I'm already at 100% above that. So I'm happy, and we can keep this very cozy here. So I was trying to come up with something that should have broad appeal. And I think auctions actually should have a broad appeal in the OR community. And because they're sort of fascinating and you always hear fascinating stories within it. So I don't know, up there in the left, how many of you heard or followed the news 5 days ago? This duct taped banana on a wall got sold for $6.2 million as a piece of art. And the art is called The Comedian. And yeah, I don't know if it's a joke or not, or if I mean, it just, yeah, really strange. So when you, person who bought this piece, which I think is also one of these like cryptocurrency millionaires, what you get is you get a banana and you get a roll of duct tape and you get instructions of how to assemble this piece of art. And supposedly this millionaire, he's planning to eat the banana. I guess he's going to broadcast it, and that has happened before too. So this is not the first time this Mauricio Catalan showcased this. He showcased this piece of art already 5 years ago, apparently at some art exhibition in Miami in 2019. And then there was another artist who then went up there, and then he ate the banana, took down the banana and ate it, and then he called his art hungry artist or something like that. So when I hear stories like this, a lot of times you might hear stories in the news, and then my thinking is, all right, what's the OR angle? How could I model this? What is there to model here? And what insight would any model bring to this? And in these types of stories, I can't think of a single thing where is the model. I mean, yeah, it's just a crazy phenomena, I would guess, and so on. So. All right. So what I was going to then talk about a little bit about is operations research in this space, in the auction analytics space, and then in the AI space at the end. OR is has a big area or sort of a contribution within auction, and even more so in these things called combinatorial auctions, where suppose you're a third-party logistics, suppose you're a company that requires third-party logistics services. So I don't know, you're Procter and Gamble, and you need to drive out all your goods and so on. Then one way to sort of coordinate that entire supply chain of distribution that you need to do is you just put up all the things that needs to get distributed, and you let the different third-party logistics providers bid and say, okay, I'll deliver that and I'll deliver that, and here's the single price I'll do for that, and you sort of coordinate that. And that is, of course, now when we're in the combinatorial space, I mean, that's naturally an operations research area, and there's all sorts of good insights to be gained from modeling. But I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to sort of focus on the more classic auction theory aspect of things here. So what I was thinking about doing is give a little bit of a history on the auction space and operations research contribution in that space. And I was just going to touch on 3 projects that I've been involved with. One is on all pay auctions when there's a retail option, which is a publication I had in eJOUR. Did this with Chris Anderson, who's at Cornell. And then more recently, I've been involved with something called the dollar auction, which has resulted in 2 publications, including CORS' own flagship journal, Infor. And this was with my economics colleague, Charles Zhang. And then finally, I was going to then show how auctions and these large language models can be used, or the AI models. And this is current work I'm doing with a colleague at Ivey. His name is Joshua Foster, and we're working on getting this working paper out. So just to sort of give a little bit of a history lesson here on Monday morning, auctions date back a long time in sort of humanity. You can think about it on the one hand, if you have you can have a sales price, like a posted price. If you go into Loblaws or any type of store, there's a fixed list price. On the other spectrum, you can think about pure negotiation. So you're, at a bazaar and you wanted to buy a carpet or something like that, and you will be haggling back and forth. So pure negotiation. And then sort of in between that space of a fixed list price and a complete haggling or negotiation, you can think of auction. So it's structured in one sense, but it also is sort of a negotiations of where you're trying to derive the prices. And most of us have this particular aspect in mind, auction aspect in mind that I'll come to. But they date back as a mechanism. They date back, centuries. In some of these economic or in auction books, when we bring up the history of it, dates back to the ancient Greeks, but it also dates back to the ancient Chinese civilizations. So in the ancient Greek, apparently, when the fathers were wedding off their daughters, that was apparently through an auction mechanism. And supposedly, even at that time, prices could go negative, according to the literature. It was used, among others, to divvy up the loot of the Roman Empire. And there was one story back in 193 where this person, Didius Julianus, who was part of the Roman forces then, he auctioned. So they had all this loot, they had the entire empire, and then people got to put bids on how much they would give each of the soldiers, and this person won. I can't remember exactly how much he auctioned off for each soldier, but that didn't last long, so he was beheaded 1 month later on. When we think about sort of the classic auction items, such as the one that was just sold, we think about a room where there's a piece of art and people are raising their bids. And so, they say, do I hear $100? Yes, here's $100. Do I hear 110? And so on. And those date back sort of to the 1700s. So the oldest existing auction house dates back to 1674, and that's actually from Stockholm. and that still exists. And in fact, I've walked by there's auction houses in person. So that dates back to 1674. And then the two most classic ones that we hear a lot in the news, including just now with that duct tape banana, which is the Sotheby's auction house and Christie's, where always these fancy pieces of art or estates get sold. They date back to the middle 1700s. And in both ones, we have as an item that's being auctioned off, and the price goes up. And so hey, it's like, do I have $100? Do I have $110? Do I have $150? And so on. The picture below there is from what's called the Dutch tulip auctions. So you see those trays with tulip bulbs coming in, and I guess these are then tulip bulb buyers who are sitting there. And that mechanism is a little bit different in that those mechanisms, the price starts really high, and then it gradually goes down in price. And so you start at, I don't know exactly what, $1 million, and then it just gradually goes down. And then when someone wants to buy something at that price, they'll buzz in. And so those auctions are then called Dutch auctions, in that the price goes down. So let's just jump ahead a couple of 100 years. Then when the internet came around, one of the big sort of survivors or darlings of the dot-com era was this auction website called eBay. And eBay actually put in, mechanized a particular auction, which I'm going to get to, which is this thing called the second price auction. So how eBay works is there's an item you want to buy, you put in your bid, whoever bids the highest wins the auction, but only has to pay the amount of the second highest bid. And when you first hear that, that sounds a bit odd. So let me get this straight. So I put in a bid, but I don't have to pay that. I have to pay the amount of a second highest bid if I win that. And it turns out that that has some nice properties and so on. And then Google AdWords is also an auction mechanism. And I think this is more in that combinatorial auction space I mentioned. And then in 2005, there was this little sort of craze for a bit. These penny auctions that I'm going to talk a little bit more about came into play. And the two big ones at that time was called Swoopo and Quibids. And there's one still existing called Deal Dash, which I will show an example of, and so on. And I should say that at any time, we're such a cozy environment. I feel I can handle questions at any time. So just feel free to buzz in or so on. So if we now then go to the sort of literature space, so that is, there was spectrum, the broadband spectrum is auctioned off, and government, oil rights for drilling are auctioned off. Lumber rights are auctioned off. So there's lots of other mechanisms, but I just wanted to give sort of a feel for some of them. In the literature space, so here's a little factoid that you might not know, that the first PhD in operations research was in auctions, or they didn't use that, he used it in, called it competitive bidding. So that was from Case Reserve, which is now Case Western or Case Reserve Western, in 1956. His name was Lawrence, or I don't know if I was trying to find his bio. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but he has the first PhD in operations research from Case Western, and his work did get published in Operations Research in 1956, volume 4. And there, that was a sort of pure, what I would call analytics or sort of math analysis approach to it, and not the game theory, auction theory that has grown up since then. That's very technical. And so it's an empirical approach. So basically, this is the approach. You take a look at what you have some data. So you have some data on past auctions, and then you can see, okay, let's suppose that winning bids have are normally distributed. Then you just find, okay, so if I bid this, there's this probability that I'll be the highest, namely the area to the right. And then if I do win at that price, I can then see what my net contribution is. And so I do the weighted average in order to get the expected return. So very simple. In our classrooms at Ivey, we use this in at least 2 cases that I'm familiar with, this sort of empirical, just let me get the distribution of previous winning bids, and then that will give me some sense for what's the probability of winning at a given bid, and then I will tailor that off. The most sort of starting point in sort of auction theory space is this Canadian-born person. His name, professor at Columbia, his name was William Vickrey, and he provided them this mechanism called the second price auction. And so you have an auction, people write down their bids on a piece of paper, seal it, put it in an envelope and seal it and submit them. So you get these sealed bids from people so people don't see what other people have bid. You open up all these envelopes, all these bids, and you look who has the highest bid, that person will win. But then you look up, okay, where's the second highest bid? And that's the amount that that person has to win. And when you first hear this, that sounds a bit weird, and you're thinking, okay, how can I gain that? How can I figure that out? And it turns out then that that has a property that you shouldn't think about it. You should just put down what you honestly value this item at. You can't do better than that. And that is the mechanism for eBay. That is exactly how eBay works, despite that a lot of people tend not to understand that mechanism and so on. He got the Nobel Prize in 1996, not for this auction work. I mean, he did a lot of other things and so on, but he sort of set the foundation for what then later became auction theory. And so that was in 1961 when he published this in Journal of Finance. Then we can jump ahead another 10 years, and this person, Martin Shubik, who also has a Canadian connection, he was born in the United States, but then this was during the war. So first back to England, and then he actually ended up in Canada, and he got his bachelor and master's degree at University of Toronto. And after he did his PhD, I'm wrong, I think it was Princeton and so on, and then he was a professor in economics at Yale. And he has then this cute little article. It's more of a note, it's more of a commentary, you can think, in this journal called Journal of Conflict Resolution, where he proposes this thing called the dollar auction paradox. And I'm going to hopefully get to talk a little bit about that. Jump forward a little bit, then 10 years, we have a big moment in sort of auction theory, specifically from an OR perspective as well. Namely, that these sort of two independent pieces of work, one by a person called Roger Myerson and another team by John Riley and William Samuelson. And they both sort of independently developed this idea that is called the revenue equivalence theorem, which says the following, that it doesn't really matter which type of auction format you use, the expected revenue will be the same, right? So whether you use this second price that Vickrey proposed, or whether you use the Dutch auction where it descends, or whether you use a first price where whoever bids the highest wins but has to pay their bid, it doesn't matter. You will all have the same expected revenue. And so Roger Myerson's work was published in Math of OR, while the other team, they were published in American Economic Review. So I'm pretty sure Roger Myerson at the time perhaps would have liked to have an AER as well, but fast forward, and his career was splendid as it was, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2007. Again, not specifically for auctions and so on. If we jump ahead a little bit more to the 2002, there was a paper in American Economic Review by another economist who also has a PhD in operations research. His name is Alvin Roth. And they did this paper here. It looks at what happens when you have this rule, the second price rule, or when you have these rules, and there's a hard shut off. So eBay works, there's a clock, and whatever that clock has been set at, so whatever activity happens in the last sort of seconds or minute doesn't matter. The auction ends right at that time. And so what this leads to this phenomenon called snipe bidding, meaning that you want to come as close to that end time as possible, so preferably like 1 second or half a second before it expires, and then put your last bid in so nobody has time to counter bid. Versus other mechanisms online auction websites where if a bid comes in the last second, it extends the clock for 2 minutes in order to give people an opportunity to counter bid. And we'll see one example of how that works. So Alvin Roth also got the Nobel Prize in 2020, and he did his PhD under this person up there called Robert B. Wilson, who also had a PhD in operations research from, let's see if I remember here now. So I think Alvin Roth's PhD was from Stanford, because Robert Wilson no, amount. So there's a piece of art, a banana that's duct taped to a wall. You value it at $6.2 million. Okay, so you can choose, should I bid or not? So if I don't bid, then my marginal return is zero. If I do choose to put in a bid of 6 million, then there's two things that can happen. I might win it, and then so let's say that I value the banana duct tape for 6.5 million. I put a bid for 6.2 million. Well, then I'm gonna have if I do win with some probability, I get a profit of 300,000. If I don't win, then depending on what the rule is, so if I don't pay anything, then of course I don't lose anything and so on. But this is where there's different types of rules. So the different types of rules is, okay, what is it I pay if I win? Do I pay what I bid, the 6.2 million? Do I pay the amount of the second highest bid, perhaps 5.8 million? And what do I pay if I don't win? So in some of the auction, I don't pay anything. So if your bid is not accepted, you don't pay. That happens for both that first price. But there's also these auctions called all pay. So you put in a bid, and then you have to pay that amount regardless if you win or not. And those are called all pay auctions. And you might think, why would you want to do that? And then what this revenue equivalence basically says is it doesn't really matter when this all balances out, how you put your bid strategy and so on, the surplus, the expected revenue and all that should all be the same. And just to show you an illustration, you're of course going to bid differently in these different types of auctions. So suppose that people's valuation is uniform between 0 and 1. In the second price auction, you just bid with straight 45-degree line. So if you valued at 0.4, you should bid 0.4. If you valued at 0.8, bid 0.8. So, and that is because you don't have to pay that, you'll pay the amount of the second highest bid. If you do have to pay exactly what you bid, then you're going to shave off a little bit. So if you value it at 0.5, you're not going to bid 0.5, you're going to bid something less, like 0.4. If you value it at 0.8, you're not going to bid 0.8, you're going to bid maybe 0.65 or something like that. So you shave off a little bit, and that's this red line. So in both those instances, if you lose, you don't pay anything. You just, okay, I didn't win it, and so you're not sort of hurt by it. But then we have these auctions called all pay auctions, and there's two versions of those as well. So if you win, you could have one where you have to pay what you bid, but you could also have a second price version, so everybody pays. But if you win, you only have to pay the amount of the second highest bid. Okay. But everybody pays. So if you lose, you still pay that bid. And then here we'll see that now you're going to seriously shave off from how much you value it. So if you value it at 20 cents or 0.2, you're only going to bid some fraction. If you value it at 0.5, you're only going to bid 1 cent. And once you get up here in this upper end, now you're going to start being a little bit more aggressive in how you bid. And we can see here that if it's a second price, you can be a lot more aggressive. And in fact, this one asymptotically goes to infinity. The first price taps out at this level. And so depending on what the structure of this auction is, you tailor your behavior, tailor your bid in order to make this magic work, this revenue equivalence theorem. Okay. All right, so let's maybe highlight a few of my things, and I'm trying to what do I want to? I'm thinking about if I should jump ahead. No, maybe not. Okay, I can see here. So let me start with this one. I've done some work on this space called all pay auctions. And this actually came out of a classroom I have in one of the undergraduate classes I do. I have people do a project or presentation on something analytics in business or news I've seen. And back then in 2007, this one student, he had come across this website called swoopo.com, and he presented that. And I'll show what happened to them. So Deal Dash still exists. So let's see if I do the following. And am I sharing screen to you guys? Yep. Okay. So here is Deal Dash, and you see these auctions are going underway. So here's apparently a necklace that's being auctioned for $7, where it just went up with 1 cent. Here's some gift card, I guess $205 at Darden Restaurant, being auctioned for $238, and it's going to expire now in 1 second. Oh no, someone put in a bid. Now it's at $239, and so on. And so you see these, presumably ridiculously low prices for, some nice items and so on. And in fact, they have them for everything. Let's see if I can choose maybe electronics. See what they're selling. Sometimes they sell laptops and stuff like that. All right, here are some Beats Studio headphones for $1.37, and it's gonna time down here to, yep, see 9 second. Now it's at the $1.38. Someone increased the price with 1 cent and so on. Okay, so what is it that happens? Well, you buy a pack of bids or chips, and then each time you place a bid, you nominally raise the price with 1 penny. So you buy a pack of 100 bids for $60. So each time you want to raise the price for a penny, it goes, so you raise the price with a penny, but it will cost you 60 cents. And so when we saw those auctions go up with a penny, someone actually paid on the order of 60 cents or 50 cents and so on. And here's an example from this Supo for an iPhone back in, this must have been iPhone 4, so that was quite a while ago. And it was at this time selling for 27 cents. Okay, but there was an hour and 44 minutes left of it. Okay? So when there was a big sort of craze around these, and a lot of articles published, or a handful of articles were published. Oh, this is like they're printing money. It's a new gold mine. It's a new economy. Blah blah blah. And so here's an excerpt from one article by this person Augenblick, and he is estimating that this Swoop is making $63,000 in profit a day. Okay, and it seems crazy. How can you just like put something up there and make money out of nothing, like cryptocurrency and so on? And so what me and my co-author did is like, okay, let's analyze this. So I want to say, okay, let's put on our modeling hat and let's see if we can understand this phenomena. And in particular, since you're auctioning, you're bidding, sorry, for items you can just buy at a retail store. You can just go to apple.com to buy that iPhone. You can presumably go to that restaurant and buy the $25 credit restaurant card and so on. So since that does exist, that will change how you bid. And so you can't analyze the phenomena in isolation. You can't analyze this competitive bidding or auction in sort of isolation as it was done before. Okay. And when you do that, it means that you're going to tap out. So these sort of in second price auction. Everybody has to pay, because you pay if you put in a chip, you lose your 60 cents. So, even if you lose, you don't get those money back. So as you keep bidding, you keep losing those 60-cent bids that you put in. So since you do that, and since there is an option to actually buy it outside, it's going to change your behavior. So you're not going to bid according to that original curve that I showed before. Instead, you're going to bid according to this black curve. You're going to shave off a little bit until you reach this particular threshold. And this particular threshold, so here's the price you can buy the iPhone for. Here's the price that they will sell it to you for. And there's this threshold, and once you hit that, you just bid that price that has been set. And if you do that, then the surplus, the company won't won't make these crazy amount of money. In fact, they will go bank, they'll lose money is our punchline. And true enough, most of these companies, the Swoopo, Quibids, and so on, they all went under or don't exist anymore. And there was also some lawsuits about them because they didn't know, is it really a retail? Is it a well bona fide auction site, or is it a lottery? Is it gambling? And if it's gambling, then it's regulated by a different agency, and you can't sort of do that. And so you have to show that no, these are so on. So that's going to be, so that was one paper, and I just want to sort of motivate these ideas. I'm now going to jump into the other one called the dollar auction and the dollar auction paradox, which ties into the all pay auction as well. So here is how the dollar auction paradox plays. You have a collection of people, you have n people, and you take up, so this is back in 1971, you take up a dollar bill, and then you ask, okay, you can bid for this one in increments of, say, 5 cents. Okay. But the catch is, and whoever bids the highest wins. But the catch is that whatever you bid, you lose. So it's a sunk cost. So if you put in 5 cents, say, okay, I'll bid 5 cents. Okay. And if you don't win, you lost that 5 cents. Okay. And if two people sort of bid at the same time, then you sort of just randomly pick between those. And this is a darling example shown in lots of economics courses and also auction classes. Like this is one of those favorite games or little gimmicks that professors like to play in the classroom, including one of Tiffany's and my colleague from the BEP group. He actually does this one as well. And what is it that happens then? Well, what happens is the following. Someone will surely toss in, yes, I'm in for 5 cents for this dollar. Okay, so now some other person will look and say, well, shoot, he's going to get $1 for 5 cents. I'll toss in 10 cents. And now it has started. Now this paradox has started because now one guy is in for 5 cents, the other guy is in for 10 cents. Well, so the 5 cent guy is not going to let the 10-cent guy win. So he's going to then say, all right, I'm in for 15 cents. So right. So, well, then the other guy says, well, then I'm in for 20 cents. And then the other guy says, I'm in for 25 cents. And then they'll continue and so on. And then at some point, they're going to reach the first critical threshold, which is when it goes above 50 cents. So one guy has now put 50 cents. The other guy counterbids 55 cents. So now the person who's auctioning it off is guaranteed a profit, right? He's going to collect $1.05, but only have to pass out $100. $1. Well, I mean, this escalation just continues. And so this guy then says, well, then I'm in for 60 cents because, rather than lose 50 cents, then he's going to put in 60 cents and just make a little bit less. And then this escalation continues for quite a while until we reach another sort of critical juncture, namely when the one bidder is at 95 cents. So one guy is at 90 cents, but one guy is at 95 cents. Now, of course, then the green guy here will say, well, shoot, I might as well bid $1 and I'll gain $1. And so I pay $1, gain $1, so I'm at least even. Well, then the 95 cent person will say, well, shoot, I either lose 95 cents or I'll just bid $1.05 and then lose 5 cents if I win the dollar and so on. And this is, just continues in perpetuity and then just escalates because there's at no point, you would always be better off winning the dollar and having a slightly less loss and so on. And this is indeed the phenomena that gets observed in the classroom. And so this article by Shubik in 1971, he just sort of proposes this and then has it as an analogy for this was during the Cold War about, arms races. And it's also been about, how research and development races and so on in companies. And so the question then becomes, how can you resolve this paradox? And particularly in this paper that Shubik proposes, and he is a trained economist and so on, he conjectures or proposes that there is no neat game theoretic solution to apply to the dynamics of a dollar auction or to escalation between two nations in abstract. Okay, so how do you resolve this paradox? And I don't know what I have next here. Okay, yeah. So what are the applications of this one? So these conflict escalations, those are during the Cold War, the nuclear arsenals and so on. You can analyze it from sort of attritional wars where you're trying to break down the other person. So that is in sort of terms of boxing or tennis and so on, like you're trying to grind down your opponent, but it costs you, of course. Research and development races. So the Concord is one of those darling examples of what happens when different teams are just competing and just sinking their efforts in. Political lobbying. So you have perhaps two different interest groups. There's some development group that wants to build high rises and so on. There's another nature protectionist agency that would like to preserve the nature and so on. And they lobby the politicians differently for, their different interests, and then have to, of course, have a sunk cost in trying to persuade the politicians to, do it in their favor. But whoever loses has, of course, that sunk cost. A few years ago now, actually dates many years ago, I think this is almost 15 years ago or more, Netflix had a challenge called the Netflix Challenge, where they offered $1 million to the team that could beat their online recommendation algorithm by 10%. So there was an open scoreboard and different teams could then participate. and you showed the running tally was by how many percent do you beat the Netflix recommendation algorithm. And so here there was a scoreboard. There was like 10 teams or I don't know, 15 teams participating. And each one would then like, okay, now I can beat it. I've improved my recommendation with 0.5%. And then the next one comes in, okay, I've improved it with another 0.25%, another 1%, and so on. And that all takes effort. And there's only one person who's going to win at the end, and that's going to be the who gets $1 million. And everybody else has, of course, this sunk cost of all the effort they have put in to try to, develop this algorithm and so on. There's an online real estate website in the United States called Zillow. They did the same thing. Same challenge. You get $1 million if your recommendation price prediction can beat Zillow's price prediction of real estate. And then in this space that I just showed you, there's these online penny auctions, Deal Dash, and so on. Okay, so how do you sort of get out of this paradox? So previously the solutions was to sort of, all right, well, let's add on some assumptions. So let's add on that you have a budget constraint. Okay, so you're sort of moving away from the sort of whatever clean original model formulations or problem formulations. So yeah, if you have a budget constraint, then clearly at some point you don't have enough money to put up to win that dollar. You could also maybe imagine that if you can jump bid. So instead, okay, it starts at 0. What if one person just goes in, okay, I'll bid 95 cents. Okay. Well, then there's no real incentive for someone to jump in and say, okay, I'll buy $1, except maybe if they want to be spiteful or something like that. So you could then, eliminate any gain that you want in your pocket, the 5 cents from, and so on. And then there's some about asymmetry between the players, and then some other sort of versions of this in terms of these stopping games, and then all sorts of behavioral aspects that you might. But what me and Charles did is, okay, we said, okay, how can you resolve this? And from the OR, operations research sort of modeling perspective, thought, well, why don't we just look at it from a stochastic process point of view? So if I am in a winning position, then there's two things that can happen. There's some probability that someone bids and I end up in a losing situation, a losing position. Or if nobody bids, I'm going to actually get the dollar. If I am in the losing position, well, there's two things. I could sort of either choose, or if I do bid and something happens, that I can move to the winning position, and that will cost me 5 cents, an additional 5 cents, an incremental 5 cents, because whatever I bid before is sunk. And if I choose not to, then, well, my new marginal value is 0. And if I am there, then I'm back at this square again. And so how can we then analyze this? How can I make sure that there's some equilibrium, or can I make sure that this stabilizes the steady state to whatever from this sort of simple Markov chain? And that as well, if I want to balance this out so I have no surplus, then these probabilities should be of this form. It should just be 1 minus the delta, the 5 cents, divided by whatever the total value is. So instead of deterministically bidding 5 cents, deterministically choosing not to bid, you flip a coin, but the coin has this weight. And so if it comes up head with a probability, then I do bid. If it doesn't, then I accept that. And if everybody plays that, then we do have an expected surplus of 0. And the expected revenue for the auctioneer is less than the dollar, right? So you can't just extract these, $10 or $100 or thousands of dollars out of a single dollar. There is no extra. And that is just to go back to this analysis that some people did in the literature. It is not possible to auction off iPhones and so on and to make a $63,000 profit just out of sort of thin air. Okay, so that was the first work. We published that in Inform, and the question then is, okay, how do you start? Well, so how do you extend it to if there's more than just 2 players who are doing the competition? All right, so in the first round, the equilibrium is the following: everybody chooses to bid. Okay, now one person randomly gets selected. In the second round, everybody who weren't selected, they choose to bid in for a given probability that has to be in a particular interval, and you have to coordinate it, and that has all sorts of issues like how we're going to coordinate what probability should be. But then once you have two people out doing that race, then they should continue doing that. Okay. All right. So then we thought, all right, but what happens? Is it possible? So this is a bilateral escalation. There's a bilateral war between these two, bidding wars between these two people. Could it be beneficial to have three people escalate and bid in between? Okay. And so we then extended this analysis, and then I'm going to see here how many remember, how many was old enough or knows who this is. And all right, so this person's name was, he died a couple of years ago. His name was Ross Perot, and this is from the presidential debate in 1992. That's a younger looking Bill Clinton. This is a Texas billionaire, Ross Perot, and this is George Bush, the senior, so not the one who.
I should have known, Fredrik. I
Oh
should have
yeah.
known. I mean, I like now that you put him in context, I know who it is,
Oh yeah.
but without the other two, totally lost on me.
Yeah, yeah, and I wouldn't recognize him either, I will admit that. But no, yeah, great, thanks. So most of us think about the presidential election, and including one that just happened, in terms of two-party races or two-people races, and that is predominantly true. But back in this one, there was a viable third party person for the election. And so it was a trilateral race or escalation between getting the voters. And so here you have to the sunk cost is, of course, you have to go and tour and lobby and visit all the states, and you have to put a lot of money into advertisement and into these events that you go to, and speaker events, to sort of conventions and so on. And I don't know if you follow the news, but Kamala Harris, for instance, she raised in the last 4 months up to the election, she raised $1 billion, right? So I mean, it's a lot of money that's being sunk into these events in trying to, and in the end, there's only one winner, right? So it's a sunk cost, but one winner. So the question we want to see is, okay, so we have an equilibrium for when there's two people bidding against each other. Now the question is, could you also extend it to a three-party race? Okay, and here's just some to show what happened. So in 1992, Bill Clinton won. He got 43% of the popular vote. George H. Bush got 37%, and Ross Perot got 19%. And back then, the Republicans blamed Ross Perot for their loss, that he took such a big chunk of vote. He participated again the next year. But the next year, Bill Clinton and Bob Dole at the time, Republican, did not let Ross Perot participate in those presidential debates, televised presidential debate. He had lost a little bit of popularity, so now he's just down to 8%. You remember the election between George W. Bush and Al Gore, which was that thing where Florida first was for Al Gore, and then it got overturned and went to Bush and so on. There was a candidate, independent candidate, his name is Ralph Nader, and he only got 3%, but the Democrats basically blamed Ralph Nader for stealing, for why they lost that election and so on. And so there are these third party, but in general, in the last couple of years, or at least since 2000, they haven't sort of been viable. They're not really part of it, not to the extent that Ross Perot is. And so the question is, would it be better? Could people be better off with a third party? Are you better off in a trilateral escalation rather than a bilateral one? So the following is, if you go back to the dollar bill, and people are hustling for that dollar bill in 5-cent increments. So suppose these two people have broken off and they're hustling, so they're increasing the price with 5 cents like this. And we had this third party person. He got stuck behind here, and the question then is, okay, should this third party, escalate up? And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's 6 increments behind. So in terms of the 5 cents, he would have to bid 30 cents to come up to the top. Should these people here in the lead enable him to do so? And if they do, could that be better off for everybody? And so it's not clear that, is it better to have just a bilateral race, or is it okay, or could it be possibly better to have a trilateral race among these conflicts? And it turns out, in fact, it is better, right? So to have a trilateral race. And again, what happens in these races is the following. Everybody is hustling and bidding, and then eventually, just by the stochastic nature of who bids and who gets selected, this person will end up trailing at some point. Okay, that just will happen by the stochastic nature of the bidding, right? And there will come a critical juncture when this gap reaches a critical juncture, and at that point, these two should pause, or in particular, the second person should pause, should look at this person and say, okay, you choose. Do you want to continue or not continue? This person who's behind by this critical amount takes up a coin and then flips it. And if it's heads, yes, then I'm going to continue the race. If it's tails, no, I bow out. And then that person also bows out because they gave this person an opportunity to catch up. And so what does that probability, how do those bidding probabilities look like? So just to illustrate, suppose here's the item is valued at $200 or $1,000. Let's say that it's valued. So suppose you're bidding up to a $200 bill. So, and suppose you have to choose a particular equilibrium. So suppose you want to choose the equilibrium to be that you're 6 increments behind. Well, then this person at this critical juncture is going to take up a coin, and with probability 0.75 is going to continue bidding. Okay. And then if it turns out that it's head, then we continue bidding, everybody bids. If he turns out not to want to bid, then it ends. And if you do that, then this equilibrium, this trilateral race is better off for everybody over the bilateral race. So on. And that we published in a game theory journal called International Journal of Game Theory. And I have a very, very bitter feud or story that we tried math of OR, but apparently our OR colleagues weren't open to that. So a little bit upset at our son. Let's do this last one here that I'm going to come to, which is now looking in auctions and large language models or AI engine models. This is work I'm doing with Joshua Foster at Ivey Business School. And this is motivated by a website called bringyourtrailer.com. So here. So this is, as far as we can understand, I don't know, the largest US-based auction website for cars. So most of these are looking very exotic, but they sell sort of normal cars too. I think you will see like a Toyota here somewhere. Can't remember. There's some normal cars as well. Oh yeah, here like Honda Element, I would say isn't a super exotic car, but there are some, 1929 Ford model, and then what up here we had this a Ferrari and Maserati and Rolls-Royce and so on. And you can see here, okay, this one is going to end in 3 hours, and currently it's at $100,000. I don't know which one should we take. Maybe this one. I'm a Volkswagen fan, so I wouldn't mind getting this one. A 1964 Volkswagen Type 2. And you can see here's this description they put in regarding it and some pictures. And when you scroll down, lots of pictures, lots of descriptions, lots of pictures. But you come down here and there is the comment section. And the comment section includes the bids. So here, this person bid 28,500. That was just right now. That was as we've been talking, and right before we started, this person bid 28,000 and so on. So the bids come in here in this comment section and so on. So currently the bid for this car here is 28,500. Okay. So the motivation is then, what is the valuation of a car? And so can you get the distribution of the consumer valuation for that? And how do the different attributes of that car build that up? And in particular, how does the description, or how does the rhetoric, how does the conviction of what the person's selling, how does that affect the overall value? And is there some way to actually capture that? So here's an example of that BMW we just saw. It's a 1974 BMW. And what we'd like to get is the distribution of the valuation of this car as a function of the description of that text. So as text comes in, this distribution, okay, so the description is this and this, the distribution will then dynamically get updated. And in fact, my colleague has a very slick dynamic presentation on it. So here you see so it's soon going to reset and stuff like that. But I can't pause it here. Let's see here when it comes to the end. So you're going to see here dynamically how the valuation changes as the thing. Okay, let's then. One more. All right. Now you see. So as text comes in, the valuation of what the car is worth changes. And then at some point, it will sort of stabilize in order and then say, okay, now I have it. And so what we are using is these new large language models, these AI engines, to evaluate how does the text get mapped onto the valuation of the car, and how do the different aspects of what the description contain contribute to that valuation. So it's not a classic auction theory. It's more, I would call it on the hedonic pricing, where we're trying to figure out what is it that builds up the valuation of these products being auctioned. So traditionally, so the framework here is traditionally you have some data, structured, unstructured, and then you extract those independent variables that you think are driving it, right? So you have to have some expertise, some understanding. Okay, here's what's important in the car. It would presumably the make, the model, the mileage, transmission, and so on. And then you have some assumption on what does the valuation look like. Okay, it's a normal distribution. It's whatever gamma distribution. And then what you're trying to do with those dependents fit what do the parameters look like through some sort of structural analysis, some structural model, like regression or whatever you want. And then that should then hit those targets, the sales price or transaction price or bids or whatever you want to see. And you try to come up with an estimate, and you sort of want to minimize the error somehow. So you assume a particular structural assumption, valuation, and so on. So what we're showing is what we're trying to do in this new framework, this large language model framework, this AI framework, or machine learning framework, whatever you want to call it. So yes, we take data, but you don't extract, you don't predefine these are the variables that are input. You use the large language model here, this script M or curly M, and that creates a vector. So you convert the text into tokens, and then you place those tokens in this high dimensional space, which we call an embedding. And then you try to map that to hit those targets of the bids and so on. Once you have this space trained, once you have these parameters tuned, then you can use that to say, okay, now I'm going to apply that to a structural model. And the one we do is you don't specify precisely what is normal, so on. You do a semi-parametric one. And then once you do that, again, then you say, okay, can I now hit those target values, the bids, and so on. So what does it look like? So for instance, here is then what you're trying to see is how much does each token contribute to the overall valuation. This is for a different item than before. This is for some Bentley. The darker the shade, the more it contributes to the overall valuation. And so some of these are very, very thin and you can hardly see. But here we see, for instance, that this word Bentley, that contributed quite a bit. The Continental, quite a bit. Beluga, I guess just the token Bell in front of there, but here Beluga, it contributed, and so on. And so you can pick out that how much we contribute. And not only that, but the same word. So here Continental, the first time it contributes quite a bit. Down here, it contributes a little bit less. You see, it's shaded much lighter and so on. What else can you then do with that? Well, you can then do some counterfactual analysis. You can then say, well, all right, what if I replace the text here, instead of having automatic transmission, let me put manual transmission. So you can then see, okay, how would the distribution look for the same identical distribution, but just swap the type of transmissions, for instance, from a manual to automatic, which is the ones here. So here it is, let's see if I remember. Red is the original, which was an automatic, and then blue is the manual transmission. I think that is correct. Might have been the opposite. I should look up the notes. The other counterfactual one here is this one had a particular mileage on it. I mean, you can think about, all right, what if I now alter the mileage? What if I make it lower? Presumably, it should have a higher value, and we do get that. And if I increase the miles it has, then it should depreciate in value. And that is exactly what we see. And I guess perhaps a little bit interesting, why does it not get monotone? These are some of those, black box endeavors where these AI, large language models. We are 3 minutes. I know I've been flying really fast, but I did want to see if one or two comments or questions. My concluding remarks is auctions are super interesting from a social, psychological, economic, and mathematical perspective. In other words, from an operations research perspective, I think there's lots of interesting things to look at, lots of interesting phenomena and mathematical challenges. And one thing I will say is when you're trying to publish that, the paradigm is heavily anchored on auction theory, and so it's very difficult to come with these sort of general OR tools and so on. But we'll see now that maybe with this AI and Gen AI, that a more sort of data-driven and sort of OR focus perhaps might resurface, just as it was that first OR PhD and so on. So with that, I pause, and I don't know, Angela, do we have 1 or 2 minutes for questions?
Sure. Yes, thanks very much, Dr. Odegaard. And now we open the floor for questions. So if there are questions from the audience, please put them to the speaker.
And thanks everybody for tuning in. That's very kind of you. Very, very kind. Hopefully you learned something and got some entertainment too on this Monday morning.
Okay, so if there are no questions, then maybe I will just put a small question. Is nowadays we talk a lot about Dr. Odegaard on sustainability and emissions. So more and more organizations are turning towards revealing their documents on carbon capping and how they are performing in this area. So do you have any advice on how auctions can be useful in sustainability assessment by organizations, or is there any your thought on this direction, if it makes
Well, there are auction mechanisms. There are auctions for trading off your carbon. I don't know if it's not footprint, but your carbon emissions rights.
Yes.
And so I know that there are existing markets, not markets, I shouldn't say. There are companies that do auction off their carbon allowances and so on. So exactly, I mean, yeah, I guess it would be context dependent, but it does exist. It is one of the features in there, and that people can then bid on it. And I don't know if there's anything specific from a sustainability perspective that should then go into the OR modeling of the auction. Yeah, I think that could be an interesting thing to look at. Yeah.
Sure, thanks. It's good to hear that there are some works in this direction, and it definitely, it's definitely good to know from this perspective as well. Thank you very much, Professor Odegaard, and it was great listening to your talk today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, and good luck. Is it Christian that's coming up now, right?
Okay, thank you. Yes. So now we have our second speaker. I will just grant him access so that he can share his slides as well.
Okay.
Okay. So Christian, I gave you the access permission to share your slides, and
Okay.
I will in the meantime introduce. Thank you. And now we have our second speaker, Christian Lemire, with us. He is Project Group Director at Genetec in Montreal. Christian graduated from the University of Montreal with a master's in physics. He started a company and was an entrepreneur for a decade. Then he became director of sales and marketing for an innovative software company in the construction industry. He has been working at Genetec since 2016 to spin up a group focused on intelligent mobility, then took on the role of director of Cities Application Group in 2020. He is currently the director of the Security Center Unification group since 2023. So I will now pass on to Christian for his talk on innovations in the use of video for traffic management. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So yeah, thanks everyone. My name is Christian. As Anjali said, I'm a product group director at Genetec and been here for about 8 years. Just a very quick, I hope you can see my slides. I assume
Yes,
so.
we can see them.
Okay, so just a quick introduction of Genetec, since you might not know it. It's a company that's been founded in Quebec, in Montreal. Been 26 years in the business. We have about just over 2,000 employees globally. We are the #1 video management software globally. So we're very proud of having a Canadian company being at the top of its market there. And also, we are a leader in access control systems. And our core system is called Security Center, and which we have a on-premise version that is used by most of our customers, and a newly cloud edition that's been released this year. So in the traffic world, we're mostly used for the video management piece, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. But there's also a bit which we focus on, which is license plate recognition, which I'll talk about as well. So enough about Genetec. Let's jump into traffic. So I've been involved in the traffic business for about 8 years. When I started Genetec, it was to really focus on that. And I want to start by highlighting some of the common problems that we see in the traffic industry. So the first one is that accidents happen really quickly, right? There's a vehicle that's stopped in just at the wrong place, where there's a curve, or a bump where the oncoming traffic cannot see them, and it can lead to some dangerous accidents pretty quickly. So the reaction time of people that are watching the traffic, or the systems that are watching traffic, need to be very fast in order to try to prevent some of these things. The second thing, which has been a very big topic in the last decade or so, is the vulnerable road users, which are usually pedestrians and cyclists. There's been more and more accidents involving vulnerable road users, and unfortunately, these types of accidents can often lead to severe injuries. And so there's a specific focus that's been put on these types of users to make sure that they can safely use the road, and that we're sharing the road amongst those vehicles and pedestrians and cyclists properly. And a lot of cities are using what they call a Vision Zero program to try to prevent as much as possible these types of incidents. And the other one, which I'm sure everybody's very familiar with, is the traffic flow, especially in the urban areas, is a growing challenge. There's more and more cars on the road, but the roads are not expanding, and for good reason. Actually, most of the more innovative cities are actually reducing their number of roads in order to push people to use more public transportation and other modes of transport, and not cars. But yeah, so that remains a big challenge, right? And then the last one is information sharing. The traffic agencies are part of an ecosystem in a city, which is usually with the emergency services, law enforcement, let's say the transit agencies, other agencies that might be like for maintenance and all that. There's several agencies, either public or private, that have some sort of responsibility or use of the roads. And the sharing information across all these different agencies is very important to allow for a safe and ease of flow of traffic. Oh, sorry. I think you might see my Teams things as well. All right. So those are the main problems that I'll be focusing on today. So now we'll dive into some of the solutions that exist in the market. So the first thing, the goals of the traffic agencies are really can boil down to three things. First is safety. then sustainability, both in terms of environmental sustainability, but also just economic sustainability as well. And then the flow, right? Like just sustaining the flow of peoples and goods across the city. And in a lot of the cities that have been, putting a focus on this, have been opening up traffic management centers for the last 50 years. The traffic management centers are becoming like the heart of the city's traffic infrastructure. When analog video started back in like the 60s, they started having these this big video wall and all that. But now, the video is actually now a critical part of traffic management. It helps operators identify and validate potential hazards and traffic issues, and so we understandably have more and more cameras that are added to the roads, and the operators have a lot of cameras to look at, too much for them to really monitor completely, right? So they have to either focus on some parts of the roadway or cycle through the cameras to try to identify something. But obviously we can't rely on the humans to try to identify every potential threat, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is to get back to this aspect of having multiple agencies, is that sharing is caring. And when we look at these different agencies, like I talked about, they're all working together. They all operate independently, but they must collaborate. Collaborate collectively in order to be able to make the road safe and also improve the flow. And so the idea is that they can do that to like a wide area network, be able to share information, or using the cloud and so on. The problem, which I'll dig into a bit later, is if we only rely on human communications, information can be lost, right? So using that is very important. One good example of that is Toronto, where you have Toronto Police, the parking enforcement, the City of Toronto itself, TTC, which is the Transit Authority, and the traffic. They all actually federate their systems together so that they can share either video or other information like alarms and things like that in a system-to-system integration. So this is the story that I wanted to look at. Is a few years ago in Montreal, there was a big snowstorm. Actually, I think it was like something like 40 inches of snow that fell throughout the night. So what happened is that in the heart of the city, this is an image of Highway 13, where it crosses Highway 20. For those who know the Montreal looks, there was a few trucks that got stuck. It's a slight uphill, and they got stuck in the snow, and that created a big backup of vehicles. This got known pretty quickly. They have video cameras nearby, so everybody knew about this, and they were sharing. But there were dozens of incidents like that were happening across the whole city, and so the agencies did not react immediately. And eventually, through the night, this whole incident got forgotten. So through the phone communications, they were having hourly conference call between the Ministry of Transportation, the city, the different city agencies, the emergency services, and all that. And this whole incident just kind of got forgotten. And all these people, there were about 400 people that got just forgotten overnight in their vehicles. And you can see in that image, some of the vehicles, had to power down because they didn't have gas anymore. So some people got some frostbite, hypothermia, dehydration, and so on. And it's only the next morning that the fire trucks came in and started providing some warmth and water to the people that were stuck there. So this was a big fiasco, right? And the MTQ was looking for a way to prevent that in the future. And really, the solution that they come up with was to not rely just on those phone conversations, but also rely on interconnected systems. that we're able to keep track of these types of incidents and share the information across many agencies. There's another common things around sharing, which is the recorded video. So if you talk to any agency almost in North America, they'll tell you, we do not record video, right? The traffic agencies do not record video. And the main reason for that is because they don't want the public to come in and request I need the video from this time, that time. I know I've been on the other end of that. I had an accident on the Highway 40 in Montreal, and I was like, hey, there's cameras there. That could show that the person that was coming much too fast on the highway and got hit us was actually the one that was responsible for this. But called in and everything. They're like, no, we don't have any recorded footage of that. And so this is a big loss of information for the public, but also for the agency themselves, who could use the recorded video for training purposes or for after action reviews and things like that. And actually, the Iowa DOT solved this problem with Genetec by basically automating the requests. So instead of saying, no, we don't record, then they said, yes, we'll start recording, but what we'll do is we'll semi-automate the request for what they call in the US Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA request, so that when the people, they can go on the website, as you were seeing in this image here, they go on the website, they select the cameras that they want, they say, I want the image from this time to that time, and then it gets to the operators, who can quickly review what has been requested, make sure that there wasn't nothing too gruesome to share, or nothing that could be problematic. And then they, by a click of a button, they approve or deny, and then the video gets uploaded to a secure cloud-based system, which then the requester can go and review what they've requested. So by doing this, it allows them to now keep the recorded video, like I said earlier, for training and things like that, for action reviews. And they also can provide those videos for when there is an incident, for either insurance purposes or whatever. The public can have that video. So that's the sharing part. But now, which is probably mostly interesting to this to the people listening today, I think, is using video as a sensor. So the video is rich in data, but very poor in information in itself, because it's unstructured data, and the human eye and human brain makes sense of that data in different ways. But can we now is now like video now taken in a point where we can actually use it as a sensor. So in the past, most sensors being used are like at intersections or on the road. They're intrusive, meaning that you have to dig up the road to put, like, let's say, wires in the road that will detect the magnetic signal of the vehicles, or they might be like a radar on the side of the road, which are actually quite expensive and really can only identify vehicles. They're not really used for anything else. But then came in video analytics, right? And at first, video analytics were what we call background subtraction algorithms. So they identify over time what doesn't move, and so what is the background, and then they can subtract that background from the image that they receive, as we see here, and then that gives them the objects that are actually moving. So this works pretty well in a traffic environment because things keep moving. So you have the identification of vehicles that can be done. The problem that arises, though, that we'll see a bit later, is that these analytics can easily be fooled by shadows or by reflections when the road is wet, for example. And so we have here, I'll start with a good example of where it's being used in a very good way. So in tunnels in general, I put Montreal here. There's a very good example is Boston also. They have tons of tunnels in Boston. So in a tunnel environment where the light is pretty static, and you don't have the possibility of shadows or a wet pavement, then the use of video analytics can be very useful to detect a stopped vehicle, detect an object that's on the road, or congestion and things like that. So this can provide alerts to the operators so that they can quickly react to something happening in tunnel, which can be obviously very dangerous and can have really big impact on congestion, right, when something happens in tunnel. So in Montreal, there are two tunnels. There's the tunnel that goes under the river, and then there's a tunnel that goes under the downtown area. And those two tunnels are using video, both in visual and thermal spectrum, and they're using video analytics on top of that video to be able to detect those types of things. And it works really well, right? Like very high reliability on those alerts. But then on the flip side, we look at this another customer in Transurban in Australia that have tried in the past to use these types of video analytics for the open roads, and there they encountered a very big issues with false alerts. They were getting a lot of false alerts that were due to shadows or reflection. So especially at dawn or dusk, when the sun was low, they had high lots of shadows, and you could, like, the shadow could spill out on the other road, so it would be detected as like a wrong way alert, which is a very big alert. If they get an actual wrong way driver, they need to really react very quickly. So this was causing too many false alerts for the operators, so the operators started not to look at it at all because there was too much distraction. So by using a combination of that and the sensor data that we were getting from different sensors, we were finally able to reduce the number of false alerts, but it wasn't really enough to make it operational. And so they kind of abandoned it, right? But then a few years ago came deep neural networks, right? And that created a big change in the way that video analytics could be used for traffic environments. So how does that work? Well, in machine learning, you basically have an input like a car, and then you have a human that would detect, well, this is the mirror, this is the windshield, these are wheels, and so on. Would do like the feature extraction. And for those who don't know, like the CAPTCHA things, like those are actually used for training algorithms, right? So like when you tell it, like, this is a traffic light and this is a bus or this is a vehicle, that information that you as a human are extracting is then actually used to train those models. So once you have the feature extraction, then it goes into a classification model, which is basically neurons that get excited by those different features. And based on the output of that, then you have a final output that tells you, is this a car or not a car, with a certain degree of certainty, right? So this was very interesting, but it requires a lot of manual labor. And if the vehicle was of a different format or had maybe like something that was wrong with it, like a mirror was out or the wheel was different or something, well, then the algorithm could be fooled pretty easily. But then came deep learning, where actually there was an additional layer of neurons in the network that was added to do the feature extraction itself. So basically what it would do is detect, first of all, like the differences in shadows or like a transition from, let's say, a color to another in the image, and then combine these together to form a part of the image, let's say the windshield or mirror, things like that, and then would identify, okay, well, this is a part of the vehicle, and this is another part of the vehicle, and so on. And that would then excite those other neurons that were saying, well, okay, if I have two wheels, a windshield, and a mirror together, then I have a pretty high certainty that this is a car or not a car. But what actually came up of that is that you could do other things, like detecting the color, the make, the model of the vehicle. So the deep learning algorithm gave us all these additional capabilities that we didn't have with just simple machine learning. So in the end, what we could do is, now you have a vehicle in the image, and then this goes to the whole deep network, and then you have at the end, oh, this is a car, and this also could tell you, well, this actually is an Audi, it's black, it's a sedan, right? So with that information, we can do a lot. So how does those traffic agency can benefit from all that data? Well, now you have vehicle detections that can happen, so they can uniquely identify the vehicle and not get fooled by that shadow, right? And so you can use it, let's say, at the intersection to identify vehicles, but not only vehicles, but also pedestrians, cyclists, and so on can be identified at an intersection to say, for example, how long is the queue at the intersection, or how long are as a specific vehicle or the sum of vehicles have been waiting at this intersection versus the other one, or how many pedestrians are waiting at the crosswalk, or how many cyclists are waiting at the intersection, or is there a vehicle going in the wrong direction? Maybe even just traffic data gathering, like how many vehicles are passing by that intersection every hour, or how many vehicles actually turn right versus going straight versus turning left. So all those turning movement counts. So the video is now becoming a sensor that can have multiple uses and can also at the same time be used for the operators to validate what's happening, right? So a human can validate the input of the alerts and things like that. And what's really good about video, it's actually quite cheap compared to other sensors, and it's non-intrusive, meaning you don't have to dig into the ground. You can just put it on the pole or on the intersection light or something, and so it's very easy to install, very inexpensive, and multi-use. So it's really the best of all worlds in a scenario like that. So we're seeing video as a sensor being more and more popular in the urban environment as well as in the highway environment. Now, if we bring it just a little step further, we could just imagine what we could do once we have that video. What are we able to do with generative AI, right? So just to level set here, generative AI is a subset of deep learning, right? Where you have deep learning algorithms that are very specific to, for example, what we should show, like identify what's in an image. You have other deep learning that are more around the language, right? And we call these large language models. And then generative AI is basically using those large language models to then generate sentences that make sense, right? And so we can use that to, for example, like describe a scene, right? Like this is a monkey wearing a funny hat, right? Well, in a traffic environment, you could use that to use the output of the image analysis deep learning, then put this in a generative AI to tell me what's happening in that scene. And so based on the output that the generative AI gives you, you could imagine that we could use that for, let's say, identifying there's a stop vehicle and a person changing their tire. So now we know, okay, well, we need to send a tow truck to help that person, versus there's two vehicles that are damaged and with a person, a person on the floor, let's say, right? And then, okay, well, we need, based on that description, we know that we need to send emergency services to go have a look at the situation. So, in the future, we can see how that generative AI could be very useful. Obviously, it doesn't replace the human; it only enhances humans because they're not always right and so on. So we have to be careful. Okay, so I want to dig into now another subset of video analytics, which is license plate recognition, which also uses deep learning algorithms, but it's still video as a sensor, right? So it's still in the same category, but it's a very unique type of sensor, and so I think it warrants its own discussion. So license plate recognition uses deep learning to, first of all, identify there is a plate in this image. Well, there's a vehicle in this image, there's a plate on that vehicle, and then it will use another type of deep learning to read the letters, right? So we don't use the usual OCR that we used to use back in the days. Now it's really deep learning all the way. So what license plate recognition does is it can help us with a bunch of different things, but on top of what it most other sensors can do, it can also uniquely identify a vehicle, which can be used for other types of traffic analytics like travel times or origin destination studies and things like that. But it can also be used for what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. Enforcement. Sorry, took me a while. So for enforcing parking or traffic laws, right? So just to put things in consideration here, we will have about 10 billion people by 2050 in the world. 2/3 of those people will live in urban areas, and we know that in urban areas, what's the most annoying thing? It's looking for parking. It's estimated about 17 hours are spent looking for parking for people in urban areas in general, but that's from small towns of 100,000 people all the way to the big cities. In New York, that's actually 107 hours that is spent by a person every year on average looking for parking. So you can imagine the frustration, first of all, but also every vehicle that is looking for parking is another vehicle on the road that should not be on the road anymore, and that is increasing the urban congestion, right? So the management of the curb is actually becoming one of the most important things in an urban scenario. Right, at the curb you have like micro mobility, like the scooters and things like that, or vehicles. You have maybe garbage trucks that are coming to collect garbages. You have mass transit. You have delivery vehicles that are becoming more and more of a problem in cities. Obviously, parking, rideshare services, EV charging now as well, and other uses of the curb. Right. So managing that curb is becoming quite a challenge because there's all these multiple uses. And let's say if there's a delivery vehicle that is in the place where the bus is used, it should, like a bus stop, for example. Well, then the bus can't get to the bus stop, and now it's stuck behind that delivery vehicle, and now all the cars behind that bus can't go through the intersection, and that's causing the other intersection at the back to be gridlocked, and now it's causing this whole mayhem just because one delivery vehicle decided to park at a place where they shouldn't. So this is really important, and one of the best ways, obviously, to manage the curb is by enforcing it, right? So enforcing, if a delivery vehicle is detected where it shouldn't be, then they get a ticket so that they don't do that behavior, right? And for that, we use license plate recognition technology. Here you have different images of different types of license plates. It could be done on a handheld device, could be solar powered, it could be a static thing, could be also put on a vehicle. There's several different ways of doing this. But in the end, what we're looking to do is digitizing the whole workflow of the permits and the infractions. So you can have vehicles that are equipped with license plate recognition. You can have your usual paper tickets that can be done, but you can also have other ways of doing this. One of the most problematic things is those officers that are giving tickets. Their safety is a big concern because obviously people get frustrated at getting tickets, and they put their frustration out on those people that are giving the tickets instead of the people that are actually creating those laws, right? And actually, in Toronto, there's been an increase in assault to parking officers, which is a big problem. So instead, one of the latest trends is to actually do all of this sort of enforcement centrally. So you have a vehicle that is reading the plates of the vehicles that are parked, and it's just driving through, right? It's not stopping for anything. It's just driving and collecting evidence. So it's collecting the plate, but also images or video, and so that this could be defensible in court. Then it can send that alert when there's a vehicle that is not where it's supposed to be, can send that alert to the system. And depending on the rules in the city, an officer can then go and give the ticket, but can quickly do it because they already know of all the data. They can have the printout and just put it and leave. Or it could be done by mail, right? Where an officer centrally reviews that, says, yes, this is an infraction or no. and then sends it through in a workflow that then sends the citation by mail. I know nobody likes to get the citation by mail, but the idea is really to improve the flow of traffic in the end through the use of that. So this is what it could look like in a system where you have like all the images and all that, and the location, the plate number, and then you can send a ticket or not. Another neat way of how this technology is being used is an example with the city of Albuquerque in the US. They actually put their license plate readers and video cameras actually on their garbage trucks. What's interesting about garbage truck is that they go through all the city roads every week, right? So they're the only vehicle really in the city that go through all the roads. And so by using this license plate recognition, they're able to, first of all, detect vehicles that might be parked in the wrong place, and again, like they're not stopping for it, they're just driving through. But we're also recording video on board, and so what this could be used is for maintenance. Like let's say somebody needs to review the status of the road or of the let's say the signs, the stop signs, the parking signs in the city. Usually the inspectors, they would have to go, and drive those roads and look at the the signs and all that by themselves. But when you have that video that's refreshed every week, then what they can do is just collect that video evidence and do it virtually. So they can do a virtual tour of the city and much more efficiently detect problems like the stop sign is not visible, or this parking sign got knocked down, or things like that. And then they can send the repair crews or whatever they need to do much more efficiently. So I think that is it. So might have gone a bit quickly on that. It's only 10:34. But anyways, the key takeaways for this is, the future in traffic management is more video. There's going to be more of that video, and in order to make sense of that video analytics are now just can do the promise that they've been promising. We've been promising that video analytics is going to solve everything in the world for years, but now that we're actually getting near this objective. And the last one was, recording and sharing this information is very important, and so we have to be able to do that without worry. And I will leave it open to questions.
Thank you very much, Christian, for your interesting presentation on the theme of video analytics. The floor is now open for questions. If you have questions, please ask.
Yeah. Hi, Christian. This is Fredrik Odegaard. I was wondering if you could maybe just shed some comments or insight on where's most of the what I call value as created in terms of, or cost, or whatever you want to call it, in terms of like the different players. So there's of course hardware players, the chip manufacturers and all that, all the sensors. There's the software of making all that sensors work. There's software then, or algorithms, or to analyze all the data. Presumably that's part of your company. There's presumably the legislation, the rules that have to set up where all these devices. So in this entire space, I don't know if you can touch on what the value contribution is and the revenue generation from the different components. Like what's the overall business model of all this stuff?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there's a lot there, but the main value drivers have been in the analytic world, right? Like the ones that actually do the analytic, because that's where you transform the simple video sensor with unstructured data to a sensor that actually gives you actionable information, right? There's a lot of specialized company that really focused on creating algorithms for the traffic industry. Now, the other thing, though, that's really adjacent to that is the camera manufacturers. They are, and the chip manufacturers that they use, because they're pushing more and more this ability to do those video analytics right at the edge, right? And that's very important for a couple of reasons that I'll get to. But in the past, we used to have servers that would do receive the video stream from the camera, do the analytic, and then send the alerts or the data to another system. And this would require a lot of infrastructure for the agencies to put up, but also delays in the alerts, latency in the whole system, and inefficiencies in the way that you analyze video, because you're not getting the raw video, you're getting a transformed video from the camera. And lastly, if you're trying to actionize anything at the edge, let's say when a detection of a wrong way driver is done, you want to light up a sign that says, watch out, wrong way driver, or something like that. Then that would have to transit through a central system, so you're dependent on the whole network. Now, with this idea of pushing the video analytics more to the edge, and the camera vendors opening up their OS on the cameras to third parties to build up apps, basically, right? So all these cameras are becoming sort of like an iPhone or an Android phone with different apps that can be deployed on them. This creating a lot of value at the camera level, which is because of those things that I said, right? Like it allows, basically the flip side of what I just said is it allows the analytic to be done on raw images, to be done very quickly, so that the alerts can be as real time as possible, and also gives the ability to do direct action at the edge, right? And so this is what that's creating is a renewal of cameras on the network, because obviously, it's not the old cameras that can do that, only the new ones. And so a lot of agencies are finding that it's actually cheaper to renew their camera fleet with new cameras, rather than putting up servers, for in their data centers. And so, yeah, I think to answer your question, in the end, the analytic world and the video camera world is where the most of the value is driven.
Thank you. Can I just follow up and currently who pays for it? Like where does the revenue source for all this get paid through?
Well, so the traffic agencies usually, like, they fund that through programs for improving roadway safety or roadway usage. Okay. So usually through grants, and that they'll fund that. There's also often the replacement of current systems. So, like, let's say they have ground loops in the ground that are slowly failing. And then they want to replace that because they still need to gather data about the traffic volumes and speeds and things like that. Well, then instead of replacing it with ground loops again, a lot of agencies are deciding to replace it with additional video cameras that are dedicated to this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fredrik. Christian, you mentioned in your one of the slides about intelligent traffic signals connecting to vehicles and so on. So, are our present vehicles equipped to communicate with the intelligent signals, or it is promising a new venue that you are talking about, in which autonomous vehicles are on the roads and they are communicating with the intelligent signals? So how
Right.
are these working presently?
Yeah, I didn't touch on that because that was kind of outside the video aspect. But that's a very interesting part where, like, the V2I, or like vehicle to infrastructure communication, or even V2V, like vehicle to vehicle communications, are becoming a very interesting innovation in the traffic world, where you're able to, for example, get from the traffic signal, when is it going to turn red, when is it going to turn green, so you can adjust your driving based on that. Or the vehicle could get alerted if there is a stop vehicle that's detected by the infrastructure. Well, then the oncoming vehicles could get an alert in the vehicle dashboard that there's something to watch out for, right? So you don't have to rely on digital signs that are only every few kilometers to warn drivers, but you can actually use the visuals inside their vehicle to alert them anywhere on the road, right? So that's just a few examples. So yeah, I didn't touch on that because it wasn't video, but yeah, it's very interesting. That makes me think, though, there's this whole other aspect of video analytics, which is the autonomous vehicle, which a lot of them use video analytics to detect their environment. And the data that they're gathering today is not really shared with the infrastructure, but in the future could be. And this is they're a company like Mobileye, which was bought by Intel a few years ago, which their whole idea is that they do ADAS system. So what's the acronym stand for? But it's basically driver assistance systems. The lane departure or like brake before you hit the car in front of you, type of thing. While they're using the data that these systems are gathering to also detect like the signs on the roads and all that, and to sort of map out the roads for autonomous vehicles in the future, so that you have a map that is continuously refreshed, so that if the vehicle, an autonomous vehicle, for example, is driving that road in a bad weather, like a fog or heavy rain or snow, and it can't detect, let's say, the stop sign because it's full of snow, well, this map that was detected by other vehicles that passed by a few weeks ago can actually tell the vehicle, well, yeah, you're not detecting the stop sign, but there is a stop sign here, right? So this whole concept of using those video analytics to augment the autonomous vehicles is also very, very interesting.
Okay. A second question is, in video analytics, I'm assuming that you are storing data at quite regular intervals, and this leads to enormous amounts of information available to you. So how are you managing this big data?
So to be fair, Genetec, we don't, it's our customers that it's their own data, their own database, and they usually manage it in two different ways. So the first is operational database. So that's the live database that's being used by the system, and that's usually has a short memory of maybe a few days, and that's typically SQL, like just very simple structured database. But then they have their offline large data set, and you basically it's good practice not to use the same database for your operational and for your more long-term storage, for different reasons. First of all, you don't want to impact the operations of your critical systems with large queries. And the second is that you usually want to transform the data as your from the live operation to the long-term storage. Either you're taking a subset of it or you're doing a deeper analytics on it. And that usually those large data sets are done in more like cloud-based systems, like Azure Synapse type of storage, where you can have analytics that's put on top of it, that is more easy, like something like Elasticsearch or Azure Synapse. You can add really quickly analytics on top of it, like other types of AI, right, that will analyze the data, or even just doing large queries for large data sets is easier than doing it like in an SQL database. So a lot of agencies, they rely on cloud storage for that. But that's done on their own terms usually. So Genetec, we don't manage that data.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience for the speaker? If there are no other questions, then we would like to thank the speaker. Thank you, Christian, very much for agreeing to be
pleasure.
on board today and presenting your interesting work on video analytics in traffic area. Thanks very much. And it was wonderful listening to you today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody, for your
Have a
participation.
nice day, everybody.
And see you in the next talk. Have a great day.
Bye.